Welcome, everybody, to the Financial Transitionist Institute. And this is our first conversation with advisors, where we're going to be talking about the tools that we use early on in this process and what they are and how we use them with clients. So joining us is Susan Bradley, founder of the Sudden Money Institute and the Financial Transitionist Institute, as well as the author of Sudden Money. And we have Bob Valenti from Ohio. We have Joan Cox from Louisiana. We have Renee Hansen and Matt Hanna from Arizona, and Jen Johnson from beautiful Connecticut. And I'm Peggy Fry, sitting in lovely Virginia. So we're going to start today and talk a little bit about what we really believe is the two sides of money. The two sides of money, both the human side and the technical side. So Susan, do you want to talk a little bit about where that comes from and show that graphic for us?
Yeah, thanks, Peg. And thanks, everybody, for joining us. This is always a great conversation to have with people who are really doing this work with real clients. And we say that transition expertise matters. And one of the reasons it matters, a really big reason, is because there are two sides to money. That's how we see it. We see that there's a technical side with the taxes and investments and a lot of the traditional planning you might have as a wealth manager or a certified financial transitionist. It's on the technical side. But the personal side, that's where relationships are, self-esteem, that's where stress shows up, that's where the emotions are, that's where well-being is. And it turns out that both sides are equally important and equally complex, but it's the personal side that drives decision-making. And transition work really begins on the personal side and then integrates the technical. So our starting point with being financial transitionist planning experts is that we start on the personal side and build expertise that's equally important and equally complex, and that we use frequently with clients in transition and sometimes with clients who are not in transition. It's all very human-based work.
So Joan, I know when we were at our mid-year conference, you talked about one client where you were using the personal side, but she really needed the technical side too. Do you want to talk about that? Because you felt that, oh man, you'd overdone it with the personal side and you really wanted the numbers. So that's happened, right?
It has happened. And it's interesting because what this client brought in was that I'd never worked with her before. So I was particularly aware of being on the personal side because that's what she needed. She was a recent widow and had also lost her mother a few months before. And so I've highly focused on the personal side for several months. Now she's approaching retirement. And she was getting very concerned about the numbers, and I realized I had not been listening to her because she actually works for the federal government and is in budgeting, and she is a numbers person. What I had heard her say initially was, I should understand these numbers, but right now I'm overwhelmed. So I purposely stayed away from the numbers for a long time. But she was starting to lose sleep because she didn't understand how she was going to be able to retire and improve her situation. So then we went back to another tool that we're not going to talk about today, but going into the numbers and making her feel more comfortable that she was going to be able to do what she wanted to do. So both sides are important. It's just we need to be really aware, I think, of listening to the client and taking the cues of what they need, what information they need when they need it.
So has anybody else used this conversation with clients that when you first meet them or you're getting ready to talk to them about what makes you different? Have any of you used this?
I think it's a great way to segue into exactly what you said. It's a difference maker. And, I know Renee and I have both conceptually talked about the training that we're going through, and it's really a way that we're branding ourselves as a team, and it is a difference maker because I think that many clients are not technical and they don't understand a lot of the stuff that we do. So that's why it's so important to communicate with them and say, look, it's not just about the numbers, it's about you as well. And I think I've seen from an early on that really connects with people.
I think it's important to let people understand what the technical numbers mean to them based on their personal and emotional needs. Connecting the two helps them feel much more comfortable and confident about what they're doing and understanding why they're doing it. That's the helpful component. What we're learning in our education is that we not only need to understand this, we need to communicate it to the client so that they understand the connection between the technical and the emotional side as well.
Mm.
So in full disclosure, I want to say that both Matt and Renee are in their first year in the core training, and they agreed to be on with us today because I think it's really important to understand that you can start this program and early on you're using these materials. Am I correct?
Yes.
Okay. And
Yeah,
Bob,
Renee jumped right in, and I was, for someone who's had long-term clients of 20 plus years, I was kind of looking, and I joined her practice back in October, and she ran right with it, and we'll touch on some of the other tools that we've used, but I was impressed how early on she adopted it, and we've seen the success and the results early on.
nice. So now, Bob, you're in the advanced group, right?
I wouldn't say advanced group. I just began my core stuff. Okay, so I'm advanced in age, but I'm not in the but not in the advanced group. Okay.
Okay.
But I find I'm a visual person, and I find when I meet a client, they have a certain expectation of what a financial advisor is, and I can tell them what a financial transition is. This picture, though, tells people that there's something different about me than anything I could say. So a picture says 1,000 words, and I show the relationship between the personal side and the technical side, but I want to focus on the personal side first and foremost to find out what is driving the reason they're with me or here to talk with me. So this is a great starting point. And I also use this when I work with a CPA. He was the managing partner of a large CPA firm. I shared this with him, and he began to send me referrals of people that were not really numbers driven, but they were more transition driven, but he did not understand what transition was, but he referred to this picture as something I do differently than anybody else he knows.
And he was happy to have you take over that human side. He wanted to do the numbers, right?
Correct, because to him it was like he couldn't work with there was no numbers. It was really out of his pay grade, I think.
Now, Jan, you were in the mastery group, I should say, along with me. And so you've been this is old hat for you, but you've been using tools and process on the human side for some time. Do you still talk with clients about the two sides of money?
That's probably the primary introduction to the conversation because it differentiates you from most other advisors.
Mm-hmm.
So my background is I come out of healthcare, so I started my career as more on the personal side. So it just feels more natural when you blend in the technical. And most people think of an advisor on the technical side. So it helps them understand and be more comfortable with, let's say, the process that I use.
Nice. So Susan, do you want to pop to the next slide, which is the stages of transition? Because those of us in the program talk about the stages of transition. And Susan, if you want to do you mind giving us an overview really quickly about that? And then we'll talk about how we use this with clients.
Sure. What we find is that in our culture, there's a general confusion about the human experience of transition. Our culture likes us to get through things pretty quickly. So we say the culture says expedite, and we say to experience. And that's a nice thing to say. But then, when you're kind of at the beginning, particularly of an event, it's a bit overwhelming. And this gives us, as advisors, a path to follow and structure, but it also gives the client some structure as well. So in the beginning, back almost 20 years, we'll be 20 years old in 2020. And in the beginning, we looked at 3 stages: the event itself ending, and then that adjustment period or adaptation time that takes a lot longer than just getting the big pieces back together that you do normally as a planner. So this passage stage was something we looked at as something taking maybe somewhere between 2 and 5, maybe 7 years. And then we identified at the end of that, there is a new normal. There's a new version of that client or ourselves if we're going through it. It's similar but different. So as we looked at all of that, it was making sense, but we realized there was another stage, and that's the first stage called anticipation stage. And we meet as a community and we talk about the process and experiences and develop our body of work. Anticipation stage turns out to be where you engage most of your clients initially. Most people come to prepare for a life event, or maybe to be, they're in the life event. But this anticipation stage is a different element into financial planning for a future event, which is kind of fundamental to planning. It puts a human overlay to it, so people are more prepared for the human experience of the event, not just the technical.
So we spend a good bit of time in our training helping people sort of spot what stage their client might be in. And how does that help you? Joan, how does that help you if you have a client knowing what stage of the transition they're in?
How it helps me and how it helps the client. For me, it helps me frame what tools I would use or how I'm going to approach it, because certainly there are different things you do at different stages. For the client, it helps reassure them. If they're in an anticipation stage, it helps them understand that there are going to be different stages to go through and different issues they'll have to face and different things that they will feel. If they're in an ending stage or if they're in passage, it's reassuring to them to know that sometimes people feel pressure to get over it or feel better, and it helps reassure them that there is a process and they can see an end at some point, and they're more comfortable with moving forward, I think.
And also in disclosure, Joan is part of our mastery group as well. So and all of the people on this call are experienced advisors. We're very experienced advisors before they started this program. But you've been sort of at this longer than others. So thank you for being here. The passage piece, though, the squiggles show that things don't always go on a straight line. Has anybody started to experience that with their clients where they're in a passage and it's not going, maybe they're taking 2 steps forward and 3 back or anything like that?
I have one now. I've been with them. Mom was 94. She just passed. We were in anticipation phase for a couple of years. But she's having a hard time transitioning out of ending into passage. So I find I spend the majority of my time with her I think I just do a lot of listening. I can't get to any of the technical. I'm really spending all of my time on the human side. I mean, I spent an hour with her the other day. We're finally meeting. I said, let's just meet for breakfast tomorrow and try to get because we do need some technical things done. But I see myself using a lot more of the tools with her, of having her visualize what's her next phase of life, because she's given up 10 years of her life to take care of mom and dad in their 90s, and she's in her 50s.
Wow. So really helping her to understand where she is in
the process of transition, and understanding what you and Susan have said is that it's a process and it's never a straight line.
So Renee and Matt, have you had a chance to even use this with clients yet? Have you started in this program?
Yes, we're using it. We're in the process of learning how to help people label the stage they're in. That's not always an easy step, because when you think about anticipation, most people associate something exciting with anticipation, such as I anticipate retirement. But the point of anticipation is the phase that you're in, you know that is going to come to an end, and you begin to think about what the next phase is going to be. And so the anticipation isn't always anticipation about something wonderful happening, because when you're taking care of someone who is elderly, the ending, of course, there's a sad phase, the emotional component of losing someone that you've cared for, and oftentimes coupled with the relief and then guilt associated with the emotions around moving into the ending phase. So what we're doing is learning how to help them label themselves, label the stage, so that we can then ground ourselves where we're at, so that we can begin to select the appropriate tool to use with them. So that's kind of where we're at. We're a little further along in being able to identify ourselves where they're at, and a little bit behind in helping them identify the stage they're at.
And what's interesting about it is when they identify the stage that they're in, you can see the look on their face. Okay, that makes sense. And there's a sense of, all right, I understand where I am. I've seen that in a few occasions.
Bob, you've gone through a pretty big transition yourself, right?
Yes, I have.
Selling your firm. So this stuff works not just with clients, right?
No, this is great stuff for each one of us to use on ourselves. So right now I'm in Passage, and it's a very interesting piece of a transition period to be in. But what's interesting to me, by knowing that there are these 4 stages, helped me be able to deal with my preparation for getting my company ready for sale, and then what I do after. And again, going back to the visual, is when I work with clients, I have a couple I just flashed to, that I share this with them, and I found each one of them in a different spot, because I assume that they're both in the exact same place, and they may not be. The one couple I'm referring to, he has 4th stage pancreatic cancer, and he's supposed to have died 1.5 years ago, but she has been like in not even anticipation, she's been in total fear and not knowing what's going to happen, because she has no knowledge at all of how he manages the money. And so she doesn't even know what the normal is going to be, let alone what to anticipate. So it allows me personally to get my own act together by using this particular 4 stages, but what I do next and what my new normal is. But the same token, it helps me with clients to let them see that there is a process that they will go through, rather than be in this state of chaos where they don't know what they're going to have to do. And that it's so overwhelming, they don't know that there is a process that will eventually get them from one point to the new normal.
So you think that it helps to have process on the human side to help people anticipate and move forward?
It does. And I can't say as much more than possible, but, pictures really tell people, it's more than just a number crunching and cash flow and portfolio management. There's really, we are going through a change, and allows a couple to talk with each other. And going back to your personal question to me, Peggy, I've sat down with my spouse and said, well, here's what I'm going through. And it's interesting because I did all of this, but now I'm in Passage, but there's no hurry. I had to put closure to what I did. So I went through ending. Now I'm in Passage. So now I'm doing the exercises that are really appropriate for me to go through Passage. So it's like, it allows me to give myself permission to do what's important to make the next step, because I have to get to a point where I'm ready to move the next step, because I've let go and I don't need to go forward. So I try to convey that to my clients. At the same time, we're beginning with new data going forward, and we can handle that with you, but there is a process that you'll be going through. So it gives them a direction and a comfort, I believe.
And you're using some of our tools on yourself.
Well, your tools are fantastic because I used to make my own up before, these are really beautiful. And when I read Bridges's book on transitions, he didn't have anticipation, and when you added the anticipation piece, it really put it together. That was the missing piece in Bridges's book. So I thank the creators of this overlay here. Beautiful.
Well, that would be Susan Bradley who put this together. So thank you very much.
Okay.
We're a community of practice, and this is groupthink. It really is.
Great.
Yeah, and I think I have to stress that. And with anybody I talk with about this training program, it's not a training program. It's a community of practitioners who want to continue to grow and evolve. And that's really important, I think, for people to understand as they come into this. I want to take a second and move on to a tool which all of us have been taught and do use early on in our work with clients, the communication preference exercise. And this is just a snapshot of it. And I'm going to sort of put Renee and Matt on the spot again as being early in the process of learning these tools, but I know you've been through using this with clients, existing clients, and maybe new clients. So maybe each of you could talk a little bit about how this has gone as you've started implementing it in your firm.
Sure, I can start first. I'm going to step back for a moment. You said it's a community of practitioners. I was explaining this program yesterday to some attorneys, and I said it's not the normal homework. The homework is the experience. This is an experience course. Mm-hmm. And it's not so much about measurement of whether you're getting it right or wrong. It's a measurement, are you moving along the path of mastering, right, the skill set for the experience. It truly is a different learning capacity and program than I've ever experienced before. So on the communication preference exercise, we first saw that it was going to be communication preferences, I slightly rolled my eyes because, of course, I knew that my clients, whether they wanted the phone or whether they wanted a call or an email. And boy, was I humbled beyond humbleness when I began using this. When we think about how we apply our own emotions in our own lives, as I began using this with the clients of my practice, I internalized. And I felt that their communication, their selections of what they wanted was a direct criticism of how I've been communicating with them for years. What was so powerful is that as I asked questions, when they mark up what they have, and I ask them what this means to them, there's some steps to go through as people will learn. What I discovered is that they were saying, Renee, these are the things that you do with me and I like. But I really like, and I don't see it on this screen, there's an additional line at the bottom that reads, if I can take mine, it reads, please remember my tendency to, and the client fills that out, and my need for. That is a powerful statement. And when you have that, and you can review it before each meeting until you really understand their communication preferences, it allows you to meet their needs early on in your relationship, early on in your contact with them, early on in every meeting or lunch or dinner or interaction. So I found it extremely powerful, particularly when you don't internalize it and you realize it is about the client, it's not about myself.
Not a grade card, yes, no.
Right.
Renee's a pretty strong critic of herself, of course, but what we've actually done is really change our process around this, where some of the feedback, the common things that we've seen is, get to the point. I want the information. Tell me, am I okay? What do we need to do? And ultimately, we want to meet with Renee and Matt and talk. And so what we've actually done as far as our process is our meeting prep, we're actually uploading to the client 3 days before. So they get the agenda right away. And so they come, they already have the information in front of them, and ultimately allows more time for them to focus on the human side, which is what we found that they wanted more time doing. And so, hey, the charts, hey, they're great and all. Do you want to hear more about that? Okay, great, we can. But most people want to come in and they want to chat and they want to talk about what's going on. And so I think what that has not only allowed us to streamline our process, but also I was really impressed, especially with long-term clients that Renee has had, the information that we're getting from them, what they're telling us is really, really powerful. You know, if you can get someone to tell you things that are on their mind that they ordinarily wouldn't if you didn't ask them, I think that's another level,
Wow.
right, of service.
That's helpful. So Jan, you had to implement this with clients when you started in the program a few years ago. So how did that go with an existing client, for example, that you first did this with?
I think with the clients that I have, they've all been pretty open to the process, because I tend to gravitate towards those kinds of conversations with clients on trying to figure out what is the most effective way to communicate with them. So with this, it's just formalizing the process of them being able to communicate how they'd like to be spoken with, what their style of communication is. If you've got somebody who's more technical or somebody who likes a more gentle approach and not so much technical, they want you to just listen. Like I spent a session with a client this morning. I think all I did, we really didn't talk about the investments. We really just talked about the transition in her life the entire time. And she was, so they feel, so she felt more comfortable communicating with me, asking questions. I think this helps you just, as a planner, understand how to formalize questions back, understanding where a client is coming from in terms of their communication style.
So do all of you then record this somewhere so you remember it, right, for every client? That was, yes. Was that a yes?
Yes.
It was a little overwhelming at first. Honestly, it does, because we have to collect so much information.
Right.
So the easy process is to ask people to do it. The more difficult is integrating it in to make sure that you acknowledge it at every interaction. That's important.
That you really do it.
Yeah.
Yes.
That was my fear. I would ask and then I wouldn't do it and I'd look like a jerk. So, I mean, that was my initial fear when I first saw this. I don't want to ask something and then not use it.
Yeah, so it's becoming easier to remember. But yes, we keep it at a place where we can see it. We're in the process of changing to a new contact manager, CRM. Yeah, that's happening today. And because in the practice, we track people's values as well. I'm a behavioral financial advisor as well through Think to Perform. So using the values worksheet, and we identify that in our deliverables with our client. And we are about to integrate that in the same format so that we have it readily available at every turn. So we see it and they see it as a reminder of why we are taking the approach we're taking. So it's like the person who says, I want to hear, I love you every morning. If you get that communication and you don't follow through on it, that's a poor outcome, right?
Yeah, that was my big fear. I'm on a scale of 1 to 10. I'm not so high on follow through sometimes, and I wanted to make sure I didn't embarrass myself.
Right.
And then the other one, I mean, maybe Joe or Bob can talk to this. Getting to the bottom. This, like something such as allow me time to process my response, means something different to different people, right?
It does.
Yeah, and I would say there are a couple things. I in thinking about what Renee said, that in core training they're starting to use it. And I used it for the first time in core training. It was awkward for me because like you said, Renee, we already had a system of asking clients what their communication preferences were, but it was strictly email versus phone versus, whatever. And this is much more detailed. And I had a client who was a widow. I'd mostly worked with her husband, and she was hesitant to do this. And I felt awkward about it too. I said, just humor me, please, because I'm doing this and I haven't really worked with you. I've mostly worked with your husband. And she had an entirely different style of communicating. She wanted to get to the bottom line, where he used to just want to pontificate or whatever. And so I guess because we're reaching out to other advisors who will be listening to this, it can be awkward, but I think there's value in acknowledging the awkwardness, because existing clients say, you know me, what do you need to know? And I'll say, I'm really committed to doing this in a different way and helping you, in a deeper way. And if you will just humor me, I realize it's awkward, but let's talk about this. So when you get to that point of recognize my need for, needing to process stuff, you can say, okay, see, that's something we can talk about. Tell me what that means to you.
And
So,
sometimes we have couples that are one and then the other in the same meeting.
They're
well,
different.
and that's what I discovered when I did it with some existing clients, is that she never talks in meetings. And when we went through this communication preference, she acknowledged this, he talks so much, and I don't want to do anything to make the meeting any longer, so I just don't say anything. That was very helpful. So even with existing clients, you can learn a lot, and it can be awkward, but I think if you acknowledge the awkwardness of doing the exercise, then it loosens things up.
Awesome. So in the essence of time, because I don't think anybody's going to listen to this for a long time, I wanted to go on to one more tool, which comes from a workbook that Susan, you developed, called the Decision-Free Zone. And it's not a no decision zone. It's just sometimes you need to take a vacation from making immediate decisions and moving very quickly to keep clients safe. So do you want to talk a little bit about where this came from?
Yeah, this was the very first tool that was created. When I wrote the Sudden Money book, that project started in the late 1990s. And there was an observation that I had as a CFP. I've been a CFP since the early 80s. And that people in new money situations in particular, that's what I was looking at the time, made some pretty regrettable decisions. So as I was looking at that and the whole experience of anticipating and receiving and all of that, it was the decision-making process that seemed to be problematic. So I started to back into that with ways to slow it down. As I was doing that, I realized that same decision-making challenge happened with all my clients at different times in their life with different events. So it wasn't just a sudden money event. It was a life-changing event. And then we know that people don't like being told what to do and what not to do necessarily. So this was not, don't make any decision. It's not a no decision zone. That's important. But it needed to be organized in a way to make a few good decisions at a time, to take advantage of the maximum decision-making power, cognitive functionality, memory, attention span that the client has, because all of those shorten up when there's a stress of change. It's a human experience. So how do we take that human experience into the financial planning engagement with the client and use that to the client's advantage rather than to just try and tell them what not to do? So it's a way of reorganizing the decision-making process over and over again. This is the kind of tool that Peggy, you and I have used that when we've worked together out doing trainings. Anytime you feel overwhelmed, it's a really good thing to just step back and do a now, soon, and later process. But let's hear what other people are doing with their clients, real time.
Yeah. So Bob, can you tell us a little bit about how you've used this?
Well, I just use it again this morning. As a matter of fact, I have a good friend of mine who referred me to their daughter and son-in-law who are going through a divorce, a very volatile divorce with young children. And the woman has been referred to me, and I use this consistently with her. I was on the phone with her for an hour this morning because of the fact that there is so much anger, so much emotion around it, but she's been used to it as her particular MO is to make quick decisions to get on, because she's a decision maker and she can't stand still. But making those quick decisions will work against her and will not be able to create a strategy. So I've been trying to convince her to do a decision-free zone, and it works for about an hour. And then and later on, the emotions are so big.
Yeah.
So I think when people are in very changing situations, it gives them a timeout card to really think about, what do I really need to do now? What's more immediate to do? So do I choose a lawyer? Do I need to get a mediator? What's the best thing? So we start thinking, and you have to kind of guide them along. So this has been a great tool to prevent people from making bad decisions in the long term, because they're going to follow their emotion in the near term.
Right.
Well said.
So I'm going to jump into this one because, Susan, I was very early in this program many years ago when I used this one as one of the first tools I used. And I had a client that I go to them. They don't come to me. And we were in the middle of a 2-year, very structured estate plan. And I had my agenda and I showed up at their home and we were starting to work on that when he tells me he was diagnosed with prostate cancer that morning. And he was in shock. And I basically put my agenda aside and I pulled out a now, soon, and later format. I had it in my bag. I can't believe I had it with me. That was one of those things. I can't believe I had it with me. So, okay, we're going to organize it this way. We're going to decide what we have to do right now, because there was no way we were going to complete that estate plan rewrite before he went into surgery. It wasn't going to happen. So let's decide what we need to do now, what needs to be done soon, and what needs to be done later. And there was a negotiation process because they first started saying everything needed to be done now, and we knew we couldn't do it now. So we put it in the other boxes, soon and later. And at the end of that, and all of the things in now were personal things. Who was going to walk the dog? Which kids were going to come to town and help him? That type of thing. And at the end of it, when I stood up from the meeting, his wife hugged me and said, "This was the most productive thing we could have ever done right now. Thank you so much for helping us get through this," because this was a huge shock to them. And it's something as simple as this format, helping people get through a very difficult time, that makes it so powerful. So that's my example. And I was, a month into the program or 2 months into the program? I don't remember, Susan. It was early.
What Peggy's not telling you is that she did something very creative. Because, when you have a conversation with people that have a lot going on, the emotional climate is strong, their head is clouded with all kinds of things. Visual is the easiest way to communicate. So I don't even know if you had the visual presentation training, but Peggy intuitively started to draw thought clouds on a piece of paper for each thing that the client had said. So she listened to what they said, let them really get it all out, ask more questions, and then she started to map it out on a piece of paper, just writing down the things like walking the dog, and then put a circle around that. And, the calendar for the kids coming in, circle around that. So she mapped all of that out. And when you see it visually, and there's a lot on the paper, it confirms that, wow, there is a lot going on. No wonder we can't quite think straight right now. And it gave Peggy a chance to sort and prioritize into the now, soon, and later. So ever since that meeting, we've been using something we call thought clouds. And it's something that you can use right from a PowerPoint. But it's a great visual to let someone see what's going on right now. And as things get better, and things from soon come up to now, and life gets more and more organized, though that thought cloud just looks so much less compact or expanded. And you start to see all these things getting done, which increases a lot of confidence too.
If I could add one more thing to that, this is, Susan, I could add to both yours and Peggy's and go back to my original comment. I find this is a great tool to utilize with other professionals working collaboratively with you. This morning, when talking with this lady who was going through his divorce, I had talked with her attorney in advance, and we worked together with her on the phone with this, and we were able to kind of work with her together because we were both prepared that she would be in an emotional situation, but we gave her the way to walk through this, what has to be done now, soon. And she could quiz either one of us from a financial perspective or a legal perspective, but we have the resources there to guide her, to give herself permission to take the time to go into a decision-free zone.
Beautiful. Yeah, yeah. Collaborative work, it's really nice.
Yeah, it was beautiful this morning.
Lovely.
Nice job.
Anybody else want to comment on the decision-free zone before we sort of draw this to a close, because we're getting almost to the top of the hour? Well, I thank you all. I think that you've given great examples of how we use this material, and again, we've really talked about a couple of slides that are intro slides and 2 tools out of 36 or 40 that we have that we teach over the course of the years that people work with us, right, Susan?
Yeah, yeah.
So if you want to pop up the last slide, did you put one last slide on there? Oh, there we go. That we're going to actually thank you guys for doing this. We're going to put this up on our website, and I'm going to refer people to it because I think you really helped us explain why you do this training and how you use these tools. And I can't see you, Matt, for whatever reason you've gone dark on me, but can I hear you?
Yeah, I froze up, so I'm not just smiling permanently like this.
I thought you were perpetually happy. But thank you all. I mean, Susan, do you want to stop the recording?
Yes, I do want to, but for people that are listening, I hope that you have a better idea now of why transition expertise matters. And this is a process. Everybody that you're listening to has been through or is in a 12-month core training program that, as Renee says, it's an experiential program. It's very different than what you've had before. Is directly using these tools and process with your clients live as you go through the training. And for whatever reason, we have been able to develop a vibrant community of people who are willing to do things like this, take time out, take an hour out of a busy week. And there's no planner in the world that doesn't have a busy packed week and lives with a full plate. And now you have some really high functioning, very successful planners giving us an hour just to talk about it. And we're appreciative. Thank you so much for everybody that was here. And if you want more information, Peggy's a great first stop, but you can always check in with us. We're happy to give you more. So with that, I'm going to sign off, and we'll stop the share and we'll stop the recording.
So before you